Okay, so I don't know if this is going to be useful at all. I'm going to be able to use this, um, but it just came to mind, so I thought I would start the recording and see what happens. I want to talk briefly about phobias. And this is all going to be kind of off the top of my head, but I'm dealing with, working with a few patients of mine right now that experience phobias, and there's some things that maybe people don't know about what phobias are, dealing with phobias, things like that. I thought I might share some of that. So, phobias are an anxiety disorder. So, like things such as OCD or PTSD, phobias are an anxiety disorder. And so what that means is that when you have the feared stimulus, which could be anything from a snake to a situation like being in an enclosed space, things like that, you get strong symptoms of anxiety and a really strong urge to escape. You get a really strong urge to leave. And either you have to endure that situation with strong anxiety, usually physiological anxiety, feeling like you're in danger, panic, that sort of thing, or you just escape the situation and you avoid it. So the proper title is specific phobia, and it could be anything from animals to situations, things like blood injury, injection. So this one is the one where people pass out. For blood injury and injection phobia, people have what's called the vasovagal syncope response, which means basically they see a needle, they see blood, they see an injury happen, and they get a strong urge to pass out. That one is dealt with differently, slightly than the other types of phobias, because that one you need to learn a technique called applied tension, which is basically using muscles to force blood to the head so you don't pass out. Okay, so like I said, an anxiety disorder, it can come in a lot of different forms. So the thing to remember is that you treat it very much like any other anxiety disorder. So there are two main things that are helpful for overcoming it, and that is exposure and tolerance, and addressing the source. So what I mean by those two is that addressing the source is understanding why this became a phobia in the first place. Did you have a bad experience? Is there some sort of abuse that's fueling it? Things like that. Is there something from the past that's directly linking your experience to the phobia? And the other side is exposure and tolerance. So that is basically what it sounds like, getting exposure to the thing that's feared, the feared stimulus, and building your tolerance to that. So on this side, there are, oops, oops, what the heck, stupid word. I don't know why I'm using word anyways. Whatever. So on the side there are two different things. You can use flooding or graduated exposure. And there are different terms for these sorts of things, but flooding basically, say you are phobic of dogs. I would put you in a room with a dog that's not going to hurt you and leave you there, basically, under more controlled circumstances, and you'll have support and stuff like that. But basically, you stay in the presence of your feared stimulus, because in reality, with anxiety, nothing's going to happen. You're not going to get hurt. You're going to be fine. There's nothing wrong with being in that situation, but you feel like there is. And so eventually your system will kind of get tired of being anxious, and you'll calm down over time. Sometimes it could take a very long time. Sometimes it could be pretty quick. But basically, you teach yourself to regulate your own anxiety and break that association between that stimulus and the fear. Flooding is scary, and it's really hard to get people to buy into, but it's actually the most common, or not the most common, but the most effective form of treatment. The other one is graduated exposure, and like I said, that can go by different names, and that's building up to it. So for instance, we'll take the dog, or like snake phobia. We'll just say the dogs because that's easy. So someone has a dog phobia. You're going to see what level of exposure generates some anxiety for them. You're going to see where they're at in terms of that severity. Does talking about dogs generate anxiety for them? Does reading about it generate anxiety for them? Does looking at pictures, videos, what level do they have to be at to start to get some of that response, some of that anxious response? And that's where you start. So you would basically start from that level. Some of the patients that I'm working with right now, it's basically, for instance, you have a book about the subject, but they've been too anxious to open that book. So the place that you're starting is to sit with the book, literally be in the presence of the book, knowing what's inside. If that's enough to generate that anxiety for you, then that's exactly the place to start. And basically you create a ladder, and you build up and up and up, increasing that exposure and increasing that tolerance. And the way you do that is you first, before all this happens, have to teach coping, which usually looks like breathing exercises and cognitive training. So these are things that I've talked about before in other areas of my channel and stuff like that, but breathing exercises, using intentional breathing patterns, so breathing in deeply, whether you're using like a number system or whether you're using a progressive muscle relaxation or something like that, using those exercises to start off the relaxation response. Now the thing is, with breathing exercises, they are not something that comes easily to people. This is something that you have to practice and train. So I use this example in my book, but if you were using a bow and arrow to defend yourself against wild predators, the first time you use it, you would not want it to be when you're already being stalked by a lion, because you're going to get flustered, you're not going to know how to use it, you're going to shoot off in the air, and then you're going to get eaten by a lion, right? What you do want to do is you want to take it, go, practice on a target, practice your technique, drill it over and over and over again until it becomes second nature, until you have that muscle memory. And then when you do have the presence of a threat, you'll know how to use it. Same thing here for the breathing exercises. You want to practice them as a skill. Practice them just like you would practice bow and arrow, violin, batarang, whatever. And you practice it as a skill set. You have that sort of muscle memory. Your body knows what it takes to bring itself down a few notches. When you're doing those deep breathing exercises, you're basically learning how to flip the switch from your sympathetic nervous system, which brings everything up, keeps you safe in emergencies, heart beats faster, your breathing is faster, non-vital functions kind of shut down a bit. And so it makes the flip from that sympathetic nervous system functioning to parasympathetic, which comes in, slows things down, cleans up the mess that the first one made. So teaching yourself that relaxation response, getting a really strong feel for what it takes inside your body to flip that switch. That's the first step. You want to make sure you have that tool, right? So if I throw you into a room with a snake and you're scared of the snake, you're not going to be left on your own without any way to calm yourself down. The cognitive training is things like challenging your assumptions about what's going to happen, educating yourself so that you don't make incorrect assumptions about the situation, reframing things. So for instance, in social anxiety, people have the feeling that they're being watched very closely, that people care about what they're doing, that there's like a spotlight on them. So a lot of that work is kind of retraining those cognitive errors that really people don't care as much as you think they do. You're not on a stage at every moment of your life. People are more self-concerned than that. And even if you do make a simple mistake, if you trip over your words or say something stupid, whatever, the effect of that is not going to be nearly as great as your mind makes it seem. So those are examples of the cognitive retraining. And so you put those two together and develop some skills for coping. And then that's what you use as your tool as you're going through the graduated exposure or the flooding, whatever the case may be. So you work from, and flooding is very simple, so I'm not going to cover that too much, but you start with wherever you're at in your sort of exposure ladder, and you get some exposure to that level of that stimulus. So sitting with the book, or maybe opening up the book, or maybe, watching a video on YouTube of, whatever it is that freaks you out, that you have that phobia of. And letting yourself get anxious. So without avoiding it, without closing it, without looking away, allow yourself to have those sensations, the tightening in your chest, kind of, sweating, beating heart, whatever it is that comes with anxiety for you. We all have kind of unique internal cues to anxiety. So let that build up for a bit. And then you want to notice, where you're at, say a 0 to 10 level, where you're at in that anxiety. And then use your coping skills to bring yourself down a few notches. So for instance, if you're up at a 6 or a 7, you want to wait until you can bring yourself down, maybe 2, 3, 4 notches down to, 3, 2, 1, whatever. Bring yourself down as much as you can. And you don't turn away or close or escape from the feared stimulus that you're using for that exposure until you're able to bring that down. And so you use that until you have some mastery of that level. So until you can open up that book without feeling like your world's going to end. You can actually become somewhat comfortable with that. And then you continue, go to the next rung of the ladder. So the whole picture for, say, dog phobia might be starting off with just talking about dogs or imagining dogs. That's called imagined exposure. And then grabbing a book about them, a magazine about dogs, Dog Fancy or something like that, and sitting with it if it's too much to open. So sitting with it, building it up, allowing yourself to calm down, getting used to that stage. Then reading through it, learning about dogs, actually diving into it and getting that whole experience. Then maybe it's watching videos of dogs, seeing dogs interact with people. Maybe you're going to, maybe you're going to use a pet, like a toy dog. Sorry, not a pet, but like a toy dog. So you can feel the fur and imagine what it might be like to be actually sitting with that dog doing that activity. And then maybe you're watching other people interact with dogs in real life. So you're in the room, but you're not touching them. That eventually you'll touch the dog, you're going to pet it, and that's kind of the top level of that exposure. So that's really the whole process. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because this is a really clear, regimented approach, the way that it's treated. But it's something that could apply to a lot of situations that involve anxiety. Whether that's social anxiety, specific anxiety about something that might be sort of phobic, whether it's towards work, whatever the case may be, you can build up your tolerance to that anxiety. But make sure you're focusing on your coping skills, because you want to make sure you have those as a tool that you can use. And then don't be afraid to start where you are. A lot of people get very embarrassed when they say, like, well, there's no point if I can't even think about this thing without getting anxious. What's the point in trying to get better? That's just your starting spot, so start there. And you can get some mastery over that, build some tolerance to that. It can take a little bit of time, but work at it. This was very rambling, very, very random, but I thought it was interesting, and it's something that was just on my mind. So, yeah, I'm going to cut it there. All right, guys. It's 11, almost 11:40, so I got to be ready to go to bed. You could probably tell I'm a little off. All right, bye.